Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, back after the weekend to talk with you guys about the NFL and just football in general. Some more storylines that happened over this past weekend that I wanted to talk to you guys about today and discuss some things I also saw with some recent comments as well. Today I wanted to talk about the biggest news probably that happened in the NFL, the salary cap estimated amount, or not estimated amount, set amount for the salary cap numbers this coming year is set around $255.4 million, a big increase from last year, and I wanted to break some of the numbers down more from that and talk to you guys about that. I wanted to bring you a free agency update on some of the moves that have started to happen over this past weekend and how it could impact some things, what I thought of those moves, and just going forward, potentially we could project some other moves that could happen as a result from the first dominoes to fall already. Later in the show, I wanted to bring up Sam Howell and his situation, not only with the Commanders. There's a lot of new moving pieces coming in with the Commanders, and Sam Howell might be the odd one left out because of it. And there does seem to be a lot of trade interest in Sam Howell. And that being said, that could just generate some new interesting dynamics that could happen afterwards with what the Commanders could do with their pick or just trading out of it. I'll talk more about that in the second half of the show. And lastly, some comments that A.J. Brown made in the media recently, actually on a local radio station in Philadelphia recently, about just, again, reassuring everyone in Philadelphia that he wants to stay, he wants to be there, and after the rumors that potentially he could have wanted to leave after a rough season last year, but he reassured everybody that he wanted to stay. And on top of that, I wanted to take those comments and just take it a step further and potentially incline at a issue that I kind of see with the Eagles, not currently, but that could generate going forward with the recent flare-ups and the incidents on the sideline, all that and more coming up in the show. But before I jump into the first segment, I wanted to please remind you guys to use the tip and donations link that you'll see running across the ticker down below me with any question that you may have that you might want to pop into the chat at any point during this live stream. We usually get a good amount of engagement and questions during these shows. So to make sure I'm able to read your question on air and I'm able to see it in the chat pop up at the top of the list, please use the tip and donations link running across the ticker below me. That's streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, the link is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. It's a big help for not only this show, but for all the shows along the network, and it's greatly appreciated every time you guys have a question to use that link and engage with the show. But that being said, I can jump into the first story, the chip shot story of every show that I like to start off with. The biggest news today, and just going on in this offseason for the NFL, the salary cap number was set at $255.4. Like I mentioned, it's a $30 million increase from the last year's salary cap that was set around $225 million. It gets another big jump, plus an additional $74 million per club for each of their player benefits. So you're looking at around a total of over or almost $330 million in total player costs for 2024. And it's more than $10.5 billion league-wide. And I know I just threw out a lot of numbers, but it all is important in just the general sense that it's big for those players, for these teams that are very binded by the salary cap numbers. A lot of them are in big deficits, just that I will get into later in the show, are the Saints, the Dolphins are in a deficit, and other teams like the Minnesota Vikings have to potentially put into their long-term plan that, a guy like Justin Jefferson, an all-world player, arguably a top 3 receiver in the league, is going to want his money eventually. He's not a free agent this offseason, but that is coming up, I believe, next offseason. And I've talked about it on this show before. He has said, or reports have said, that he's wanted to reset the wide receiver market for a while now, just based on the numbers and all the records that he's broken. I don't see the Vikings having a problem paying him and keeping him around as long as possible. So the market right now for receivers is set at $30 million, with Tyreek getting that the most latest receiver to get that number. So just all of that combined in, it really helps those teams out, really just to, set their future plans more in order, get everything under wraps. Obviously, it starts with this offseason, but that is a big part of it going forward. Another thing that plays into the salary cap being so high, just continually to show this exponential growth year in and year out, is because of all the new media deals, the TV deals that have just continued to grow in a crazy way ever since, the expansion of the regular season, the new modifications to the playoffs, and these huge new deals you get with Amazon Prime, streaming networks like Peacock as well. All this money, just, it seems like a lot, and it might seem to more, regular fans, just the general fan in general that, why is this all happening and why is all this moving on to streaming platforms? It all comes back to the salary cap and increasing it, and it only helps to benefit probably the owners a lot, but these teams that have these big numbers and that they need these funds to come in to function for as an organization, to get all their numbers in check and produce a good competitive team next year in and year out. And all this just plays a part in that. Something that I thought was pretty interesting that I found out while researching, all the numbers behind it, was that after 2012, the salary cap started growing by $10 million at a steady rate for a few years after that, and then it actually went down $10 million from 2020 to 2021 because of the COVID year in 2019. There was a lot of, just players that deferred, a lot of clubs in general too that deferred their money in that year, and it actually didn't take it into account until 2 years after 2019, and it went down that year. And that's why now it all plays back into it, why you see such a huge influx now of $30 million, a huge jump in money with $30 million now coming in instead of that steady $10 million that was shown from 2012. All of that played into account because of COVID, because of how strange everything was. A lot of changes were made during that year, obviously, and teams had to pay for that, unfortunately. But now they kind of get a reimbursement in a way with this sort of influx of money. And now, if you want to look forward and project even more, I mentioned just the salary cap, the free agents that teams have to get in order now with March just on the horizon. Really, just we're actually in the last week of February, so March is just really right around the corner. Teams have until 4 p.m. Eastern Time on March 13th specifically, when the new year officially starts, to get that salary cap number under control, or each team to get the number that they're at right now under the salary cap before free agency begins. And on top of that, I mentioned a lot of those teams are in a bind right now, specifically the Saints, which I'll talk about. They need to get their, I'm going to talk about it later, but just right now, I think they're $74 million into the salary cap debt. So they're going to have to do a lot of moving, a lot of restructuring deals to kind of get under that before the new year starts in the NFL. And with all this news coming out about the salary cap numbers and, what these guys eventually are going to get paid, the league also set out their designated numbers for the franchise tag for the non-exclusive, the exclusive, and the transition transitional tags as well, kind of alluding to what I'm going to talk about later. But some of those tags were pretty low, in my opinion, for some of the positions that I can just think of off the top of my head. The transitional tag for running backs is single digits this year. It's going to be 9.7 around there, just in that ballpark. Some running backs that are available for this are Najee Harris. He's not an unrestricted free agent this year, but going forward, if the Steelers were to do something with him, it would be at a 9.5, 9.7 around-ish amount. Just today, you saw with a lot of running backs not getting designated to receive that franchise tag. You saw Josh Jacobs, that his tag amount was set to be almost $15 million or 14 and some change after that. And that's obviously a high number for running backs, but because that is an exclusive tag, it will be a lot, and they get that set amount from the top, I want to say the top 5 most recent paid players at that position. I could be wrong on that. It's something like that. It's the top 5 most recent or the top 10 in general in the position. I was looking it up before this, but I can't remember now. And his, obviously, paying him 14.5 would be way too much for a running back based on the market nowadays. So he's not going to get tagged. Same with Saquon and Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler were all designated today to not get that franchise tag. They still could sign with their teams, but they're not. They won't be put into that restrictive franchise tag. So they do have options to go to other teams, but that is still yet to be seen. Overall, that's really what the salary cap is set at now and what every team's kind of looking at to kind of work with and get their numbers in check before the new league year starts on March 13th for the NFL. That day is coming soon, like I mentioned, and some teams I wanted to talk about next were going to be the Dolphins, the Saints, the Bengals in some aspect, and some other teams that just made some more recent free agency moves to start off free agency in just this period of everything's starting to get into a whirlwind now. The NFL Combine is just a few days away, technically, with all the drills starting. And that'll be the next topic I get into after the break. A little free agency update about who's moved where, who's staying, and what that can mean for some of these teams. But I'll send it to a quick break right now, and it'll be more free agency talk, franchise tag players, and some significant players being cut, all that right after this.